So welcome back to this channel once again, and here I am with another tutorial which I'm going to start on ILE basics to advance. So here in this video I'll be discussing on introduction to ILE from AS400 to IBM. This is the topic name just. So basically I'll be discussing about the introduction and giving you an example of how we can write an ILE, a simple ILE RPG program, and also giving you the basic information of the concepts or the things which we will be using in the ILE RPG thing. Okay, so and the more detailed things will be coming in the next tutorials or next videos very soon. So here just start this video. Now here I'm first talking about the ILE or overview of RPG4, because ILE is just basically implemented on the RPG4 language. Okay, and why it is more advantageous than the previous version RPG3 or even RPG4. So in ILE we will be having the concepts of modules, service programs, and other things like binding directories, and so these things basically um, gives us the facility or facilitates us to create a modular programs or maintain them very easily. So that's why it is very advantageous than to using simple RPG4 thing. So you can implement the ILE concepts in your RPG4 programming style. So here we basically know the RPG4 is having HFDICO specification types. So HFDICO, that is control specification, file specification, definition, input specification, calculation, and output specification. The more information you can get from my website www.myeasyclasses.com. There I have written a blog on this, the specifications used in RPG4 or the ILE programming. Okay, so I'm not going into that detail, so you can read from there. You will get the information. Even I'll be taking one example so that you will be getting hands-on on this. So the main thing here comes as sub-procedure which we will be writing in the ILE. So basically we can write the sub-procedure things. So we cannot write the procedures or sub-procedures. We can say in the OPM programming, OPM level program, model programming. So there the thing comes as we can write the subroutines. Okay, but here we can write the procedures. So procedures, so they are written once and they can be used anyways. We can export them anywhere. Okay, export or import things we can use in the ILE concept. So how what is the specification for that? So sub procedure specification is basically based on procedure specification, definition, and calculation. So basically a procedure is like, for example, just take an example. Procedure is like having this thing, the procedure specification, that is the begin and the end of the procedure. Sub procedure, this is the begin and this is the end of the sub procedure, and the definition, whatever we are defining, is comes inside this procedure begin or end, and that is in D specs, and then the calculation specification. So here I either use C specs or I can simply use a free format. Okay, so I used free format. I usually prefer to write the free format things, not totally free, but free format in C specs. Okay, so here we have a procedure specification where we have procedure begin and end, and inside that we have the definition and calculation, which is limited to the scope of that procedure only. So whatever we are defining in that procedure is specification, what are the variables we are defining, that are limited to the scope of that sub procedure. Okay, now the point comes is the program creation and calling. Okay, so as we know that we take option 14 Okay, we take option 14 to create. So this is an SQL RPG program, so that's why it is taking this command create SQL RPGI. But if you go with for example, if this is a RPG program, okay, for example this is an RPG program, and if you take option 14, you will be seeing create bind RPG program. RPG command will get triggered, okay, from this. So if you compile your program using this, so this is a simple one-step process where you will be creating your OPM programs. So by default you know that only one step, that is create bind RPG, or you take option 14 um, to create a program. So this is a one-step process where a temporary module gets created in Qtemp, and that you cannot use anywhere. Okay, so you cannot use that module anywhere in other programs. So this is the drawback. So for example, I just want to use that module in my program. If someone has written that module and I want to use that feature, I won't be able to use because I'm not using the ILE features. So here comes the two-step process, that is program creation. So here I'm not going to create that program using create bind RPG. So the first step I'm following is to create the module using option 15 or create RPG mod. Okay, so using this thing I'll be creating the module. So a separate temporary module object will get created in your library, whatever you specified. Okay, and then you can create a program using this module, or if there are any other module, for example 2 or 3 more modules you want to add to your program, you can add to that program and you can create a program. So your program may have that module or other modules. Okay, so it doesn't matter that only using this module you want to create your program. So you can create your program using multiple modules. Okay, now you can use this module in any of the program which you want. So this is the benefit. So this is the two-step process. Then you will be creating the programs using create pgm command. Okay, so this is the command. Or you can create a service program. So for example, so here comes the things like procedures, sub procedures. Okay, you return a sub procedure, and then you can either create a program out of that. So that sub procedure is the part of a module. Okay, and that module will be bind to the program or the create service or the service program. So you can use create SRVPGM command to create a service program out of that. So you have created a module, then you can create a service program. Okay, and then in service program you can bound that module. Okay, so this is the thing. In ILE concept, you can create you can write the procedures in your module, sub procedures, maybe one or multiples, and you can then create the modules. That modules are reusable, and then you can bound those modules to your programs either using create pgm command, or you can bind them to the service programs using create srvpgm command. Okay, now, or you can bound more than one modules to a program object, and then you can call those either those programs or for example your modules. For example, you want to call that module which you have created in program you have created. So first thing you have to do, you have to bind it with some service program or with some program. So if you have bounded with that and you want to call that module, you can use operation code. You can say call b to call that module. Okay, or you can call a procedure out of that. So in that case you won't have to use call b, you can use call p for calling a procedure, or you can ignore that because call p is a optional thing which you can use, and you can return the values out of that. So a procedure takes some input and returns some value to us basically. Okay, so this is the thing, and we can maintain the modularity of our system, and we can maintain those programs very easily which are written as a sub procedure. So we have written say millions of sub procedures in some service programs, and we can maintain them easily because we know that this sub procedure do this task and this sub procedure do this task. Okay, Then the next thing will be the thing is here is you can either use the ILE thing in your OPM modules as well. You can use them. So for example, you have created a program using option 14, create create bind RPG program, RPG command. Now you want to use those service program procedures, or you want to call them in your OPM program, which is created using option 14. So what you can do is you can create a binding directory. So here the concept comes for the binding directory. So create BNDDIR. So you will be using this command. So we can create a binding directory out of this. So for example, I am creating ILE BND1 in my library easy classroom. Okay, sorry, easy classroom. Okay, binding directory created in library this. So if I do the work object ILE BND1, I can see that object of name ILE BND1 of type this star BNDDIR is created successfully. So now what you can do is work BNDDIR ILE BND1. So just take 9 here. So you can see 9, work with binding directories, create, delete, whatever. 9, just take option 9. Now here you can put your entries, work with binding directories entries. So binding directory is just you can say a package which contains a set of or the entries of modules or service programs. So here you can enter for example, you want to add. So I can add here the name of the module, or the type would be the module, and the library or the activation groups. Okay, so for example, if it is not module, it can be a service program as well. So I can add as service programs, any number of service programs or other modules to it. Okay, we can add the modules and service programs to it. Then we can use this binding directory. We can define this binding directory in HSpecs control specs in your program, which is created using binding create BNDRPG. Means your OPM program has now a facility to use these service program procedures or modules in your OPM programs as well. So you just have to create a binding directory, and you can use that binding directory in your HSpecs, and then you can call those procedures or module whatever you want from your OPM program. That is RPG4 OPM program, which is not an ILE program. So this is the facility. So I'll be discussing about this in much detail with examples in further videos. So this is just a concept, just you must have the knowledge that you can use the ILE concepts, or ILE you can call the service program procedures, you can call them modules in your OPM programs using this feature, create bind directory. Means the binding directory feature. So you can define those binding directory in your program, because you cannot bind a program you cannot bind the modules or you can say the service programs in your OPM program, because you don't have the facility there, because you have to use create bind RPG program RPG command. So there it won't have any facility for that. So that's why create binding directory feature comes. So module is basically, for example, you created a module, so you cannot run that module if you are not binding that to a program or a service program. So first thing you have to do is to bind that module to a program. If you are binding that module to a service program, then you have to bind that service program to a program to call that procedure or that module which you want to call. Okay, so here service programs is a package of procedures. Okay, so package of procedures means you can have multiple modules. For example, you have 2 modules, and those 2 modules have for each sub procedures, and you are binding those 2 modules into a service program. Now your service program has 8 procedures out of 2 modules. So your 2 modules are bound to the service programs. Now you have access to the 8 procedures using that service program only. So now you have to bind that service program to some program, then you can use those 8 procedure using that service program only. Or for example, you don't want to create a service program, you want to use those modules, so you have to bound those modules, those two modules, to the program in that case. So this is the thing which comes which you must have the information of. So these are the things using create pgm command, create rpg mod command. You can create a module or the program, which is known as the ILE programs, the modules or the programs. So here you have a two-step process. Okay, so in ILE you have a two-step process, in OPM you have a one-step process. So we have service programs, programs, modules, procedures, or we have binding directory in our ILE thing. So we can use these things in our programming to have a better maintainability of our code or modularity of our code. So why we are using the binding directory? So for example, if you're using a binding directory, the main importance or the advantage of that is the modules or the service programs entry which are listed in the binding directory, as I have shown you. So they are only used in the program whenever they are needed. So they are not automatically, whenever you call that program, they won't get loaded or initialized or something like that. They won't get comes into the picture. So once they gets called or they gets used only, then they comes into the picture. So they basically reduce the program size. Whatever your program you're creating, you can use the binding directory, so they will basically reduce your program size. So this is the best way of programming. So here basically I discussed the procedures, the specifications, or you can say programs, modules, binding directory, and service programs. I didn't have taken you to the examples there to create programs or service programs. I'll be discussing that in our future tutorials on ILE in a detailed way, so that one must have the better understanding of the things and or the hands-on those things. Okay, so this is just a simple you can say introduction. Now I'm showing you an example where I have created a simple rpgle program, rpg-ILE program. So here is a simple example of a simple ILE RPG program introduction. So just take two here. So you can see that what I told you, that we have HFDICO in RPG4, so we can write HFDICO, and all are optional. Okay, so either we can use them or not. So whenever they required, I would be using them. So F specs is not required, specs is not required, or O specs is not required, because I don't need to write any report out of that. So I just declare the, you can see that D specs. So here this D specs is a global variable which is accessible to the whole program. Okay, sum. So you can see the sum variable sum variable of 4p0 length. So this is accessible to the all sub procedures which is local to this program. Okay, now whenever we are defining a sub procedure, or you can say a procedure, so whenever we are defining a sub procedure, we have to define the prototype of that sub procedure. So the prototype would be defining, for example, the name of that sub procedure. Here comes the name of that sub procedure, and then the declaration type would be PR. Just take F1 here. So you can see PR specification defines a prototype for a call. Okay, so whatever procedure we are calling, so this is the prototype for a call. So after that, you can see this is the length 4p0. So this is basically denoting the return value. So whatever you are returning from this procedure will be coming here. Okay, so this is the return value which is you can say which is returned from this sub procedure. So we can also this, and these are the two things, these are the two input you can say input values. So 4p0, 4p0, and you can see here I defined the value as value. For example, this one keyword is value. So you can see this, why I defined this as value, because we can call a procedure, you can say sub procedure, either by call by value or call by reference. So the default for the ILE RPG thing is by reference, call by reference. So I have to define value here. So if I want to define anything else, anything here, it will be call by reference. Okay, so here I define value, so this will be a call by value. So for example, if I want to, here you can see, if I want to call this procedure sub procedure 1, and I have given the values here 5 or 10. So if I want to give these values like this, I have to use call by value only. If I want to declare this as value, I cannot define this line as like this. Okay, then I have to define like, for example, I have not given the value, so I have to define some variables, for example a or b like thing. Okay, like this, and I have to declare those variables here. Okay, so then this will be the thing which will work. So here the value thing works, and we can pass the values like this also. So we can also use that variable feature here also. We can define a or b, we can declare a or b in the value, but in value we can also write like this 5 or 10, because the value, you can say the value is changed or would not be reflected here. Okay, would not be reflected here. So what I'm trying to saying is, this is the procedure prototype where I would be defining the input values or input parameters. So here are two parameters which are coming as input to this prototype, and this is the return value. Okay, so the return value would be coming here. Okay, and this is call by value. So if it would be call by reference, I would be using I would not be giving value here. So what is call by value and call by reference? I'll be discussing that thing with a good example, with the same example, you can say, in my next videos or in my next tutorial, so that you have knowledge of those things also. Now you can see that this is the sub procedure, and don't come into this for right now. I'm going into the sub procedure input. So we have two things, the procedure prototype, so which we have defined here in D specs. Now at last, so for example, if you have used O specs here, so after O specs then only you can define the P specs. Okay, HFDICO then P. Okay, so the procedure is the procedure begin. So here you can say procedure begin. So here you can write the export keyword also if you want to export this to some other programs or service programs. So I'm not using that for now. So this procedure would be used in this program only. Okay, now here is the procedure input. Okay, the procedure input, you can see the procedure name, and the procedure declaration type is PI, PR and PI. Just take F1 here, procedure interface. Okay, yes. So here you can see, that num1 and num2 are two input variables which are coming to this procedure as an input. So the value is coming here, so all the declaration would be part of this thing. So for example, if you have written num1 here and num2 here, that won't means that you are declaring the variables. That is simply a prototype. So if you're trying to pass num1 and num2 from here, and you have written num1 and num2 here, so you don't think that this is the declaration, this is just a prototype. So you have to declare those variable here then. Okay, this might some people got confused with this thing. So if we write num1 or num2 here, they thought of this, that this is already declared, and you are getting, for example, you have passed num1 and num2 here, and you are getting the error that num1 and num2 are not declared, and you are seeing that I have declared this thing. So this is a prototype, this is not the definition. So you have to declare here num1 and num2. Okay, So keep this in your mind while writing the code. Don't get confused with this. So here, whatever we are declaring, we are defining here. This is the procedure input num1 and num2, and this is the return value as 4p0. And the procedure prototype and procedure input must be matched. As you can see that here the procedure prototype is this thing, and the procedure input is also the same, 4p0 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 value. So if you want write the procedure prototype and procedure input as same, you will be getting the errors. That might be 20 severity 20 errors. And now here you define some variable. As you can see, you have defined some variable twice. So this is the global variable. So whatever the value is here, that won't be reflected anywhere else. So okay, that can be used anywhere in the program, but this sum is different than that sum global variable. So this is the local variable to this procedure only. So the scope is limited, so the value is also limited. So the value of the sum variable is limited to this procedure only. That's why we are writing return here. Okay, so whatever we are doing, we are summing these two numbers num1 and num2 and evaluating that to some variable which is declared as local variables, and then we are returning the sum. So we use return keyword, and we are returning this sum to the calling of this. Okay, and this is the end of that sub procedure. Okay, so the sub procedure consists of begin, end, and then procedure input. Okay, and then we can define as per our need. We can define the local variables. If you don't want to define the local variables, if that doesn't need me, so we cannot. Okay, that is optional to me. So we can also write return num1 plus num2, then semicolon. So this is just to show you the things. So that's why I did this. I have used some variable, and I just also want to show that this sum and the above this sum, which is declared as global and the local, are different. Both have the different value. Okay, because both taking the different memories in the memory. Okay, different addresses in the memories. Okay, so and now we have a sub procedure defined, the sub procedure prototype, and a sub procedure input defined. Now what I need to do is to call that sub procedure. So we are just declaring sum as 0, not evaluating sum as 0, initializing the global variable. Now what I'm doing, I'm calling the sub procedure. So either I can use call p here simply. Okay, so if you are using call p, in that case I am not able to return that value, but we can skip that thing. So I can only write sub procedure 1. So this means that I am calling this sub procedure 1. Okay, and then I am passing the value. So if there are no values, I am not passing any values. Okay, if there are no input parameters, for example this thing, I am not passing any values. Or if there are no return variables, I would be simply writing this thing. So this is the simple sub procedure call in which there is no return value and there is no input parameters. So in case if it returns something, so I can return that to some variable. So here I'm returning that output which is returned from this sub procedure 1 to this variable sum, which is a global variable, and I'm passing two values. So 5 10 5 10. So I'm passing two values 5 and 10. So these will be added and returned as a sum here. So here I'm using call by value, so that's why I'm able to pass 5 and 10 here by value. So I can also pass a or b variable here and define that variable here. But if I would be using call by reference, I would not be able to call by this syntax. Okay, and then I'm displaying, simply using display opcode to display the sum, and then I'm setting the last equal indicator to on. So this is a very simple program where we have a simple sub procedure 1. We are passing two input values to this, and we are returning the value from this. Okay, now just see. So what I need to do is I have to create a module first. F4, take F4, or you can write create RPG program mod command in the command line. So just take F10 here. Now we have to define the debug view as star source so that I can debug this program and show you the output. Now I have to use create PGM command. So either I can create a program or we can create a service program. So I'm creating a program here, ILE RPG, ILE PGM. Okay. Easy class 1. So this is the library, and now we can define the module name. So the module was ILE PGM1, easy class 1. Okay, we can define the multiple modules as well if we want to add this to program. So we are just binding only one module right now. Just take page down. Here we can bind the service programs, but there are no service programs right now which I am binding here. We can bind the directory from here also, or we can define that in HFDICO also. We have both options, but I'm not binding any directory. I'm binding directory. I'm not binding any service program here. I'm just binding a module here. Okay, I'm just creating this program. Okay, so we can bind the binding directory, the service programs, modules. So I'm even one module, multiple service program, multiple binding directories as per our need. So we can see that the program is created. So here we can see that this is a two-step process where we have availability of the module object as well, and we have the availability of the program object as well. So in case of OPM, we don't have the availability of the module object. We have only one object, that is the program object. And if we see by DSP-PGM on that, if we do the DSP-PGM on this thing, ILE PGM1, in case of create bind RPG used, so we can see that the module would be pointing to qtemp in that case. Okay, which means that this is an OPM program. So there we can see, just go back, just do DSP PGM of ILE PGM1. So here we can see the information of the program information. So this thing, just we press enter. So this here we can see the modules which are bind to this programs. Just press enter again. So if there are any service programs which I bound will be shown here, and the signature of that service program will be shown here. So here, there are no service program which are bound here. There are no data items which are either exported or imported here. Okay, so this will show the copyright information if provided. I didn't provide anything. Now just do the debug of this program, call ILE PGM1. Sorry. I take some time, the system is slow. Just wait for a few seconds or maybe minutes, or might be minutes. It comes. Just put the breakpoint at line number 1, call ILE PGM1. Okay, now we can see this is the global variable sum. This is 0 for now. Okay, and this is 0. Now we are passing these two values. So if we want to go to that sub procedure, we have to take shift F10 here. Okay, by simply pressing F10 we won't be go to that sub procedure. So to jump to that sub procedure call body, we have to take shift F10. Okay, now as we can see, the num1 and num2 are passed as 5 and 10. Okay, so if we see the sum is now 15. So sum is basically pointing to this local variable sum 15. So if we see that this global variable which is also named as sum, so we can see it is still 0 because these two variables are different. This is a global variable and this is a local variable. So now I am returning. So I have written the sum variable to that call. So now you can see that sum is returned. Okay, 15. Now if I see the global variable, it will show me 15 because I have written that output of this sub procedure one call to this sum variable. So this sum variable is basically this one. Okay, now I'm displaying that. So I can see I have displayed 15. Now I'm setting last record indicator to on, and this is the end of program. So here we have seen the demo of the simple ILE RPG program where we have written only one sub procedure, and we saw that how we will be defining the procedure prototype, procedure input inside the procedure body, which is begin or end. We can see how we can declare the variable, or we can do the calculation inside that sub procedure. Okay, and how we can call a sub procedure here. So this is the thing which I just want to show you. And here I also saw that the call by value thing, but I'll be explaining this thing more in my another video, so that you will be getting a good idea of how you the practical knowledge of value and reference thing, because people know that call by reference and call by value, but they don't have the exact thing, which they don't get the exact thing which what actually it means about. So I'll be surely creating the video on with the same example, and will be showing you what is the exact difference between these two things. Okay, so here as I can say again, I have discussed these things. So I have discussed the basic things about the RPG4 languages specifications, ILE thing, coding specifications in ILE, that is a procedure specification. Okay, and the program creation, the sub procedure calling. uh, I talked about the create a bind RPG, how I can use the ILE things in binding RPG. So I just only talked about that. I don't get into the detail about that. I'll be going into detail in other videos with proper examples. So I talked about binding directories, creating programs, creating modules. I talked about the service programs, how we can do the entry of modules or service programs in the binding directory, why we use binding directory. These are the basic things which we talked about, but we don't have our detailing here, but we have a detailing of the example of a simple ILE RPG program that you can refer, and you can build you can start building your knowledge from very basics on ILE thing, because most of the people is requesting me to create videos on ILE RPG things from very basics till advanced, so that they must have the knowledge from the basics. Okay, so I'll be surely trying to create all the basic steps from basic till advanced, so that one must have a detailed or a very good knowledge built on the ILE things. Okay, so that they can start writing the things on ILE. I know that most of the people's who are watching my videos, they have the good capacity, or they must have expertise in writing the ILE things, ILE programs or ILE procedures or whatever things are there. But these are things for those who just want to learn the basics or the advance of the ILE. Okay, so thank you and have a nice time and good luck.